Hey everyone, Saul from Three Kingdoms Games here. Coming to you today to talk to you about the latest in the Transformers TCG news, which is the fact that there is now supported organized play for the Transformers TCG. So Wizards of the Coast will be giving out promos and other prize support, proper tournament structures, things like that for the Transformers TCG. Now they've released a comprehensive rulebook. I have that right here. It is a 27-page document. So what I want to do for you today is I have read this over and I want to try to give this to you in more layman's terms than the rules lawyering that would be involved in understanding this otherwise. Now, this is a big deal because this is the fastest Wizards has gotten to organized play for one of their games. Usually it takes over a year. We're only sitting at roughly 9 months. So this is actually pretty big for them to already get to actual proper structured support for their product. Now, this contains 8 sections in it. So section 1, which is tournament fundamentals, just explains who the judges are, what the venue is, what it means to be eligible to be a player, organized play account, stuff like that. Now, the only things that would make you ineligible to be a player is if you're under the age of 12 and have not gone parental consent, you've been banned by the venue for whatever reasons, or you've been banned by Wizards of the Coast. Otherwise, you should be eligible to compete in any Transformers event. Section 2 is the tournament mechanics, which I have more notes on. I will be going through that one more in depth. Section 3 as well, tournament rules, tiebreakers, all that stuff I will be going through further. Section 5 is tournament violations. 6 is rules for constructed formats, which I will read specifically from that section at that point. Rules for limited format, which is section 7. I'll go through that one as well really quickly. It's not that difficult to understand. And then what is the minimum requirements for sanctioning is section 8. And then there's an appendix and stuff. Now, I'd recommend everyone kind of give this a glance at some point. But for now, you're here, watch this video, and I'll explain what it means. Now, for section 2, tournament mechanics, 2.1, which is the first section of it, is formats will be first to 2 wins. So from now on, a tournament, when you're matched with someone, you will play at least 2 games in that match. If one person wins both of them, they win the round. So best of 3, first to 2, however you want to call it. Draws don't count for a win. So if you go, one person wins one, next person wins one, and then you don't finish your third game, it is now a draw for that round. There are tiebreakers, but this is only used for single elimination events. Player with the most wins wins. So in the case of if you'll only get through one game and someone won one, they win the round. And then there's tiebreaker rules for the draws, like I was saying. Now, 2.2 is to choose who goes first at random. This is very straightforward. Roll a die, flip a coin, whatever you want. The 2 players must come to a conclusion of who will go first by random means. Sorry, well, who will get the choice to go first by random means. Then whoever wins this randomization will get to choose who goes first. After the first game, whoever lost will get to choose for the second game who goes first. And so on and so forth until the conclusion of the match, which is the 3-game round. 2.3 is starting procedures. So each player presents their team, then randomizes their deck, presents their deck for shuffling if your opponent wishes to shuffle, and then play commences. So drawing 3 cards, etc., and you continue onwards. 2.4 is just talking about concession. Now, players can choose to concede at any time. If you see that you can't possibly win the game you're in, but would want to go to the next game, you can concede. If you'd rather not give your opponent just a draw and you wish to concede, that is fine. The only rules against concession is that if you try to concede or convince your opponent to concede through coercion of some kind, now you're in tournament violation, and this is a big no-no. So pretty much, if you wish to concede for strategic purposes, you are allowed to do this. Otherwise, you are not allowed to concede for means of gains. this happens all the time in a lot of events. I've seen people do this where they talk about, deals and things like that for events. This is not allowed. So 2.5, if time is called, so this is in the case of time being called. Active player finishes their turn. So I come in, I call time because I will be the tournament organizer at Three Kingdoms Games for a lot of our Transformers tournaments in the Toronto area. You get to finish your turn, and then the passive player in this case, so your opponent, will get one last turn, and however it stands after that is how the game stands. In a single elimination event, this is where the tiebreakers come in. Now, I had a bunch of players read this. They missed that it said single elimination, so this is why I want to do this video series, to try to at least simplify some of this. In the case of a tiebreaker, you count up damage, and it's whoever has received the least damage wins. If this is a tiebreaker, if this is also a draw, so you've both received 5 points of damage. You then go to flipping top 2 cards of your deck. Each player flips the top 2 cards of their deck. Most oranges wins. If this cannot draw to a conclusion, i.e. somehow you and your opponent have the exact same deck composition and you are just hitting the exact same thing again and again because you keep flipping until you have a result of more orange. So you flip 2, compare, flip 2, compare, flip 2, compare, go through your deck, keep this process going. If this keeps coming to a draw of some kind, you then roll a die or flip a coin or whatever. Random means someone wins. Now, this is only in the case of single elimination, and personally I do not agree with single elimination being timed, but I can understand for games like Transformers and other games that sometimes take a little bit longer to play, you wanted to keep that more confined. Now, 6.2 is time extensions. Sorry, 2.6, the dyslexic moment there. 2.6 being time extension. So if I stop your round for a deck check or a extensive judge call, anything like that, I can allow you to play for longer, but that's all under the decisions of the judges of the event. Deck registration. So for 2.7, if there is a larger event and it requires deck registration, you must submit a deck form, so a deck list with your team, your deck, your sideboard, your anything in your sideboard, so your sideboard characters, because there is sideboard characters allowed for this game, which I think is really, really cool. Judges will check this for eligibility, so we will check through to make sure your deck has the appropriate number of stars, appropriate number of cards, etc., because there are minimums for this purpose. Now, for 2.8, deck checks is something that judges will take your deck and compare it to your deck list. If it matches, you're great. If it doesn't, we have an issue, and that's where penalizations and things can come in from judges. So make sure whatever is in your deck is on your deck list. You do not want a discrepancy, because this could cost you serious like tournaments. I've seen this happen many times in Magic and other games. So you want your deck lists to always be precisely what is in your deck for deck check purposes. Also, make sure your sleeves are new for major events. This is a big one, or whatever you're using, just so that there's no marked card issues. I will be going over marked cards in a little bit in this. 2.9 is you can appeal the judge's rulings. The problem is on most local level stuff, appealing the judge is literally appealing the person who just made the ruling. So it's going to be hard. On a larger event, there's a judge structure where there's the floor judge who's the one interacting with you. There's a judge above him and usually another one above that. And you can appeal up the chain if you really think it is necessary to go that far. Now, 2.10 is about dropping. If you want to leave an event, you have the right to do so. But if you leave after the current round's pairings have been made, you are in the event, your opponent gets a win because you're just not there, which is a big deal sometimes. So if you're going to drop, please drop before pairings are announced. Now, if you drop in the case of a top 8 cutoff or things like that, and you would have been in the cutoff and you left because you thought you weren't in it, or for whatever reasons you were no longer there, no one's going to replace you. It is what it is. So it will stand that way. So you want to make sure you drop at the right time. 2.11 is about taking notes. Now, notes are allowed in this game, but you cannot bring them with you to the match. So you can show up with a blank piece of paper, pen, whatever, write down your notes. Now, you do not have to show your notes to your opponent, but if a judge asks you to see your notes, you must present them to the judge. But yes, you cannot take any outside notes, help, strategic advice, anything like that into a game with you. 2.12, which is about electronic devices. Now, this is one that bothers me because 2.12, electronic devices are not allowed in tournaments for most games. Magic, things like that, you are not allowed to use your phone. Now, at a local REL, some places will let you do it for like life counters, things like that. But really, you're not supposed to use electronic devices. Now, this specifically says you can use them to take notes, but it falls under the same restrictions as before. So blank screen pretty much is how you start. And you can take whatever appropriate notes, hide them, whatever you want. But again, if asked by the judge to check your notes, you must present them. This also will open you up to a lot of other issues, and I will explain that in a second. You're allowed to use the official app for tracking of damage, conditions, things like that. So that's probably the biggest reason, is that they have a note, that they have an app already for this game. The part of the rules that makes me a little irked, makes my life harder as a judge, and I want them to remove this, is you're allowed to take brief phone calls. Wizards, why are you letting my players take phone calls during events? You are allowed to take brief phone calls as long as they do not pertain to Transformers, the game, or anything like that. So what am I supposed to do as a judge? Am I supposed to tell someone, oh, you're answering your phone, put it on speaker? Or you get a text message prompt while you're taking notes on your phone. Well, now I have to check your text message to make sure it wasn't your buddy who's observing next to the other player sending you card lists from his deck, or whatever. This starts now opening a lot of ambiguous loopholes that makes me have to invade someone else's privacy. So please, if you're a player, don't use a phone. Just don't do it. I know they say you're allowed to. Don't. Sorry, that one's going to bother me a lot. 2.13 is about video coverage. Pretty much it's the standard stuff. Anytime that there's video coverage of an event, you are allowed to refuse to be on video coverage. If spectators want to take video, they cannot be intrusive into the match. Things like that. Spectating a game as well, obviously, don't interfere with the game. Don't talk to the players if you can avoid it. Things like that. Because this is tournament structure, this could run into issues for players involved in the match. And I do not want to DQ someone over his buddy making a joke. I've had to do it before. It sucks. Now on to section 3, which is about tournaments. 3.1 is tiebreakers. This is just explaining how the tie-breaking system works, where it's about opponent match win percentages, your game win percentages, opponent game win percentages. This is just to break up. So if someone we have two players that both won all their games, end of the event, they both won all their games, but one is higher than the other. This is just to explain how we get to this conclusion. There's a piece of software that does it for us. And usually, as long as we've entered all the information properly, this will have an accurate result. 3.2 is about the current recognized formats, which is constructed, which is your standard 40-card minimum constructed format. Limited, which contains booster draft, sealed, and turbo. So sealed is sealed deck, open, make a deck from your packs. Booster draft is drafting. And turbo is you open 2 booster packs and play. It's the 2-pack sealed format, which a lot of us love about this game. 3.3 is about authorized cards. So it has to have been a printed by WotC card. So no outside proxying. Must have a standard backing. So no modifying the backs of your cards. No discernible marks or anything that would make you know that this card is your card. So this is where solid back sleeves come in handy, because this is what you're going to want so judges don't call you on marked deck. Has to be legal in tournaments, so no swap parts. For 3.4, proxy cards are not allowed in tournaments unless a judge issued it. Now, this happens in the case of you opened a sealed product, it got damaged during the process of the event or of the drafting or whatever, and it was not willfully damaged by you. Judges can issue a proxy card, marked, stamped, signed, whatever, by the judge, so that you now have a legal proxy to use in replacement of that card. Otherwise, no proxies. New releases are only legal in tournaments. So, for instance, Wave 3, which is coming out at the end of June, will be legal at the official release date, not before. So if you got the proxies early, you are not allowed to use, or sorry, you got the promos early. So there are some Wave 3 promos coming. We have them already. You are not allowed to use them in sanctioned tournaments till the release of the card. I know, seems obvious, but that is what it is. Card shuffling. A pile shuffle is not a good enough shuffle. You must randomize your deck to the best of your ability. Then you will be able to present it to your opponent, who can then also choose to randomize it anytime you randomize your deck. So anytime you go through your deck, look for a card, shuffle your deck for whatever purposes, your opponent now has the right to shuffle it. If your opponent believes that you are not shuffling your deck well enough, they can call a judge over. Don't do this. If I'm getting called over to shuffle your deck, I'm going to be giving you issues most of the day, because it means that you're doing something wrong, probably. But it's shuffling. Can you do this motion? Now do this motion repeatedly with a deck of cards, and you have now shuffled your deck to a satisfactory amount. But honestly, a pile shuffle is not a good enough shuffle. This just leads to potentially being able to stack your deck. So pile shuffle and then shuffle them all together. That's fine, but it has to be attempted to be randomized in a well enough way. Sleeves, you're allowed to use plastic sleeves. Anything that goes into your card, though, into the card sleeve, must be uniformed, i.e. if you double sleeve any cards, you now must double sleeve all your cards, because you want no discrepancies between your cards. If for some reason you feel the need to stick 2 cards in one sleeve, don't do this. But if you do, you now have to do this for your entire deck. Don't do this. This just leads to, again, people calling someone on cheating really, really easily, and I don't like having to deal with it. Any marks, abrasions, or damage to your sleeves, you might potentially have to re-sleeve or change your deck out. No holograms or reflective images on the backs of your sleeves. So if you're using the Ultra Pros, which have the little hologram circle, it must be the face of the card that has that circle, because these can be used as reflective surfaces to see cards and things like that. So pretty much that's sleeving. Like you should know this, but if you haven't played other games, it's important to make sure you use sleeves where you can't see the backs of your cards, because if there's damage to your cards themselves, you can now get called on marked deck if it is a discernible pattern of damage to your sleeves or your cards, and that is a big issue. Someone recently got called out on that in Magic. Yeah, so don't do that. That brings me to 3.8, which is marked cards. This is damage to a card in a way that you can tell what card it is, or damage to the sleeve in a way that makes it a discernible pattern. Pretty straightforward. Pretty much, if it seems obvious that you're cheating or could be taken as you are cheating with a marked deck of some kind, don't do it, please. 3.9 is about hidden information. So certain zones in this game are public knowledge. Anything on the board, anything that has been played, anything that is knocked out. This is all public information. You cannot obscure this from your opponent. If they ask you questions about stuff that is public knowledge, you must actually answer them without trying to be evasive or hiding information or misleading them, because that gets you to a different kind of judge call on you. Hidden information purely refers to the cards in your hand that your opponent does not get the right to see. You can choose, though, at any time to show cards from your hand. There is nothing stopping this. 3.10. Tapping. Turn your card 90 degrees, please. Literally is all it says. It must be at least 90 degrees shown. Do not turn it 45. Your Transformers attack, turn them sideways. Pretty straightforward. Now, the next section I do want to go into in a little bit more depth is Section 6. This is deck construction. It's pretty straightforward. You have a 40-card deck for a constructed tournament, 3 copies of any card in there, 25 stars total between your characters and battle cards in your deck. Very straightforward. That 40 cards is a minimum. You can have as many as you want as long as there's not more than 3 copies of a card and your Transformers are only one of a named card. The name contains both the name and the subname. So for instance, if you wanted to use a Starscream that was the rare and the Starscream that were the common, because they have different subnames, they are considered different cards for the purposes of this game. You are also allowed to have a sideboard that contains 1 Transformer of up to 20 stars or less and a 10-card sideboard, which you're allowed to switch between games in a match. So first game, you must play with your registered deck. Games 2 and 3, you can swap cards from your sideboard in and out of your main deck. So that covers that section. Pretty much that is what most of they're talking about in 6. 6.2 is specifically talking about cards that are legal in format. That is stuff that has been released by WotC. So currently your starters, your wave 1, wave 2, wave 3 stuff. Swap parts is banned in tournaments. It mentions this again. So do not play with swap parts in your deck. Sideboard rules, which I just covered already. You're not allowed, between your deck and your sideboard, you're not allowed to have more than 3 copies of a card. It's very straightforward. 3.4 is if something refers to a card from outside the game. This game does not involve a wish board. It does not have to be out of your sideboard. It can be from any cards you own that are Transformers cards. As long as you have it physically there. Wizards, you are hurting my brain as a judge. Please, why aren't you just making this a sideboard wish board rule? But that's a whole other thing. That just allows someone to have extra cards sitting in their box. Totally, people won't try to switch cards in and out of their deck in a tournament. I have faith in everyone to be honest and trustworthy people. Yeah, not really, unfortunately. 7.1 is rules about limited format. That's very straightforward. Anything involving limited format, you have, other than turbo mode, so for sealed or for draft, you can have 25 stars worth of characters after your drafting or sealed opening process. You have to have a 25 card minimum deck. So again, 25 battle cards. Anything outside of this is allowed to be used. This is considered your pool, and you can swap that in and out as a sideboard move as well. So abnormal products is also covered in here. This is if a product is damaged, strange. I've had booster packs in the past that have no battle cards, things like that. Judge's discretion about switching those packs out. Though to be fair, switching those products out might be at your expense, but that's a whole nother thing. Also, products will be supplied by the venue for sealed events. If you show up with your own product, it will be mixed into the pool, which is then distributed out just to prevent people from pre-loading packs in any way. Not that I think people would, but it's totally something that you could do if you really want to. Now, the cool thing that I think about this game, so the sections I didn't cover, which I will go over actually really briefly before I get to the cool thing about the sanctioning, as far as I'm concerned. Now, let's see. Tournament violations. Don't cheat, don't be involved in collusion or bribery, wagering, unsportsmanlike conduct, or slow play. I think those are all very straightforward. Pretty much don't ask someone to concede under certain circumstances, like I will give you this prizing if you concede. Not allowed to do that. Cheating, very straightforward. don't cheat, don't stack your deck, don't draw extra cards. Accidentally doing it and calling a judge over and things like that, we can deal with that. Doing it intentionally, you are in violation. The unsportsmanlike conduct, swearing, tearing up people's cards, being abusive in some way or another. Now, slow play is the only one that gets kind of ambiguous, and that is just play with some sense of urgency always. Yes, take tactical moves, things like that, but you're supposed to be playing at an appropriate pace. So if I give you 50 minutes, 5-0, to play a round, which is first to 2 wins, and you're taking 3-4 minutes a turn, you are not playing fast enough. I am sorry. You need to be playing a bit faster. That's literally what it is. Someone can call me over to watch you play if that is the case. So, yeah, like that's 4 player communication, again, is what I covered earlier. If someone miscommunicates something intentionally, this is where we get into issues of public zone stuff. There is a play sequence rule here, which pretty much says that if you play stuff out of sequence, that is okay so long as you get to a legal state at the end. Now, I think this is more to cover the case of people flipping battle cards in the wrong order, not flipping for attack and then bold and then whites and things like that in the specific order. This just prevents someone who is essentially a rule shark looking for a loophole to try to stop you from being able to flip. So I don't really have a huge issue with this rule. I'm curious about that. Timing on triggered abilities, things like that. So long as you haven't missed sequencing, you can go back and deal with this stuff. That's section 4. Now, the sanctioning is the section that I think is the most interesting to me. So, for those of you who don't know, Wizards of the Coast, Magic, you need 8 players in order to sanction an event, and it must be a minimum of 3 rounds. A sanctioned Transformers event just needs 4 players and 2 rounds. This makes more sense to me. This gets people playing more, because for smaller stores or smaller venues or smaller towns, they might not be able to get 8 players out all the time for Magic, but Transformers, they say 4 players, you're good to go. So I would love to see something like this brought to Magic and some of the other Wizards games. At this point, it's pretty much just Magic and Transformers, but you never know. So there you have it. There is the layman's terms breakdown of the comprehensive rulebook. It's a 27-page document. I would recommend you reading it through before you compete in any larger events. But at local REL, people like me will take care of you. So don't worry about that. Tell me what you think of these rules in the comments below. I'm always up for reading them, and I would love to get into a debate if you think a rule makes no sense. I think that electronics rule makes absolutely no sense to me. It's just opening you up to me now digging through your personal life. You can follow us on all major social media. That's in the description box below. You can follow our blogs at threekingdomsgames.com, as well as you can always stop into store. There's one in Markham and one in Toronto to see what's going on. Talk to you next time.